Meet Shin Wolford, a lifeless office worker who has never seen the sun, until the legendary Truck-kun sends him crashing into an isekai world packed with magic and monsters. Reincarnated as a child, Shin is adopted by a powerful old wizard and begins his new life with some seriously OP powers. Nothing to see here, just Truck-kun doing his job. Sometime later, an 8-year-old boy named Shin Wolford uses his magic skills to hunt some game deep in the forest. It turns out that the salaryman from Japan reincarnated as Shin and now lives in the forest with his grandfather, Merlin Wolford, who took him in as a baby when he found him in a carriage that was attacked by a demon. Although he is now in a fantasy world, he still has most of his memories from his past life except for the memory of how he died. When he gets home, he tells his grandfather about the hunt, and the old man is impressed that he managed to catch a boar and 3 wild chickens. To check how much he's improved in his magic, Merlin asks him to set a pile of logs on fire using fire magic, and Shin does it with ease, impressing his grandfather once again, but he tells Shin that it's time he improved in his combat skills and swordsmanship as well. Just then, a woman named Melida, a friend of Merlin's, arrives with a warrior named Michael. Melida complains about how dangerous it was for Shin to go hunting a boar at his age, but he explains that he had his magic gear on and assures her it's safe. Witnessing Shin's impressive feat, Mitchell chimes in and suggests that the young boy is now ready for more advanced combat training and sword fighting. Ever since he was little, Melida has been teaching Shin magic gear craftsmanship while Michael trains him in swordplay. 2 years have passed and Merlin decides it's time to take Shin deep into a forest for his first demon hunt. When they get to a cliff, Merlin teaches Shin a special type of magic called search magic, which would allow him to scan the entire forest and sense all other living creatures around. Impeccably, Shin succeeds on his first try, and although Merlin is impressed by this feat, he doesn't have time to react because Shin has already detected the aura of a demon nearby. Without wasting any time, they track down the demon, and when they find it, Shin immediately takes out his magically enchanted sword, which he uses to kill the demon in mere seconds, leaving Merlin stunned once again. Afterward, Merlin tells him that the demon hunt is a success and the two head home. Later that night, Merlin, Melida, and Michael discuss Shin's tremendous progress in magic and combat training, so Melida suggests that he must be from another, as that is the only logical explanation for his innate talent. The next day, after an intense training session with Michael, Merlin takes Shin up a hill to have a heartfelt conversation. When they get there, Merlin tells him that he's not his real grandfather, but Shin reveals that he already knew. Merlin then narrates how he found him as the sole survivor in the wreckage of a demon attack and decided to adopt him. Shin asks about his parents, but Merlin explains that he has no idea since they were unrecognizable after the attack. Upon hearing this, Shin admits that he doesn't remember anything about them and has already taken Merlin as his grandfather. He thanks Merlin for taking care of him and expresses how grateful he is for Michael and Melida. This confession causes Merlin to cry while Shin gets embarrassed by the weird sight. 5 years later, Merlin throws a small party for Shin on his 15th birthday to mark the beginning of manhood. At the feast, a man named Daseum, who Shin calls his uncle, suggests that Shin is now a man and is old enough to go into the real world on his own. Merlin realizes that he hasn't taught Shin any real-life skills and is hesitant to let him go into the larger society, especially after they all realize how dangerous and advanced Shin's magical abilities are. As they deliberate on the issue, Daseum explains that Shin's magical abilities are so dangerous that it could upset the balance of power if Shin is allowed to leave the forest on his own. While discussing, Daseum states that the best option for Shin is the magical academy in the capital because he'd be around his peers and would be able to harness his immense abilities better while building his social skills. Shin agrees to the idea and realizes that his uncle Daseum is actually King Daseum Earlshade of the Kingdom of Earlshade, while his big brother Sieg is a court magician, and big sister Christina is a royal guard who is the king's escort. Shin is stunned by the revelation, so Daseum decides to tell him the story from many years ago. A while back when Master Merlin was a ferocious mage that helped kill a powerful demonoid along with Mistress Melida, and how they became national heroes as a result of the feat. Even though he's being showered with praise, Merlin manages to remain modest, but he soon starts blushing when the guests inform Shin that he and Melida were once married. After the feast, it is concluded that Shin would attend Earlshade Magical Academy, and a half-month later he embarks on his journey to the institution. On the carriage, Shin thanks Melida for escorting him and his grandfather. When they arrive at the capital, they're given a very warm welcome by the residents due to their status as national heroes. Afterward, they're shown to the mansion they'll be living in, and once again, they are treated like VIPs and welcomed by the head butler, Steve, the head maid, Marika, and the head chef, Collar. Merlin and Melida immediately conclude that Tasim must be behind the VIP treatment, and so they tell Shin to go into town for a walk so he doesn't get overwhelmed. While exploring the city, he comes across two girls who are being harassed by some adventurers. He immediately steps in and defeats the men with incredible ease and ensures the girls are safe. This is the first time Shin is encountering a peer up close, and since it's a beautiful girl, he gets flustered and falls for her instantly. Well, he doesn't know this yet.
What?
After playing the knight in shining armor, Shin has lunch with the girls who introduce themselves as Maria and Caecilian. As they converse further, Shin discovers that the girls would also be taking the entrance exam into the Magic Academy. Maria appears to be more outspoken as she declares a friendly contest and vows to get the top score in the exam. On the other hand, Caecilian, who Shin is already infatuated with, seems to be quite shy, and it looks like she's also attracted to him. The conversation continues and Maria begins rambling on like a fangirl about Master Merlin and Mistress Melida, who just arrived at the capital. Wishing to maintain his undercover status, Shin downplays the topic and pretends not to be interested in the talk, but that becomes more difficult when Maria suddenly starts daydreaming about the Weissman's mystery grandson who would also be taking the entrance exam. She begins imagining how the boy would look and appears to already be in love with the grandson even before meeting him. To keep his cover from getting blown, Shin decides to excuse himself after paying for the girls' lunch and promises to see them on the day of the entrance examination. After he leaves, Maria begins teasing Caecilian about how love-struck she is and wonders where Shin came from. On the day of the entrance examination, all the aspirants arrive at the Earlshade Magic Academy to take the tests. When Shin arrives, he mentally motivates himself to do his best, especially because he'd get to meet Caecilian again if he passes the exam. While checking out the notice board, a rude noble named Kurt attempts to intimidate him, but he quickly shows him who's boss. Kurt, who is the heir of Count Rietsberg, begins boasting of his status in an attempt to make Shin feel small. Even though Shin isn't intimidated in the slightest, someone interrupts Kurt's rants by warning him of the punishment he would face if he continues throwing his authority around. The arrogant student looks over and puts himself in order when he sees Prince August advancing toward him. The prince seems to already know who Shin is and introduces himself as King Desem's son. Shin is excited to hear this and immediately addresses him as his cousin. Meanwhile, the other students including Maria and Caecilian look on and are baffled by how casual Shin is with the prince. Soon enough, the examinations commence and all students take the written test first. Afterward, it's time for the practical exam, and Shin receives a huge shock when he sees the students casting spells and using magic by chanting incantations. He had never seen people his age perform magic before, and so the scene before him is way below expectations, because not only are they chanting words, but their magic is also very weak compared to his. When it's his turn, the instructor pleads with him to keep his power under control because the king had told her about his overpowered abilities. As a result, Shin decides to use his weakest magic spell, but the resulting blast is still so powerful that it almost brings down the room. After the exam, the committee holds a closed-door meeting and concludes that after his display, the wise man's grandson should be the top scorer. The next day, Shin goes to collect his uniform after being accepted and is informed that as the top scorer in the entrance examination, he's required to give a speech on behalf of the new students during the entrance ceremony. Shin tries to evade the task by pointing out that August is in a better position to give speeches. However, in the end, he's stuck with the responsibility because, in Earlshade tradition, there is no special treatment given to nobles. As he leaves with August and some other students, Maria watches him a little disappointed that she wasn't the top scorer while Caecilian just stares at him shyly. Maria notices this and tells her to go talk to him instead of crushing on him from afar. At the same time, Kurt is furious that he missed out on the top scorer position and concludes that Shin must have cheated, so he plots his revenge. At home, Shin observes his magically enhanced uniform and decides to alter it a bit to suit his taste. The day of the entrance ceremony comes and the people waste no time surrounding Merlin and Melida once they arrive with Shin. The ceremony commences and Shin discovers that Maria and Caecilian are both nobles. While Shin delivers a brilliant speech, Caecilian now realizes that he is Merlin's grandson they've been anticipating to see. Later that day, she confides in him and explains that Kurt has been threatening her and her family since she keeps turning down his advances. A few moments later, Kurt arrives and tries to take Caecilian with him, but Shin stops him and promises to protect her regardless of whatever entanglement she has with Kurt. Suddenly, August arrives and uses his royal status to force Kurt to leave. Afterward, Shin invites everyone to his home to ask Merlin and Melida if he can alter Caecilian's uniform to protect her against Kurt. However, Melida reveals this would make Caecilian's uniform a national treasure level item because of how powerful the enchantments are. Melida decides to test Caecilian to see if she took advantage of Shin's kindness. Eventually, Caecilian comes clean and admits that she was desperate for the protection, but before she leaves the house ashamed, Melida agrees to help her because she has proven she's worthy of the protection. Later that evening, Decium asks Shin to never reveal he can create national treasure items or it could lead to an inter-kingdom war. He then asks Shin to enchant uniforms for August and his guards, Julius and Thor. By the end of the day, Shin has enchanted his friends' uniforms, but Maria sensibly refuses to have hers enchanted as she doesn't want the weight of having a national treasure in her possession. Caecilian is particularly glad because, to her, the enchantment feels like Shin is always protecting her. She thanks him and he offers to take her home starting henceforth. Since it's already so late, Shin offers to take everyone home using his teleportation spell, something that was also supposed to stay secret. The next day, before Shin goes to pick up Caecilian at her house, Granny Melida reminds him to be prudent with his magic and not show off unnecessarily. On the way to school, Shin and Caecilian subtly flirt with each other while Maria walks closely behind, physically exhausted and irritated by youthful gestures. Soon, they arrive at school and August doesn't miss the chance to tease Shin about how he is already getting all the girls on the first day of school.
How? Hold on, bro. How?
Their conversation is interrupted when another student named Alice Corner chimes in, looking quite disheveled. When Maria asks about her appearance, she explains that she was just so anxious about the first class and that she didn't get enough sleep. Just then, the teacher, Mr. Marcus, walks into the classroom and the students greet him. He tells them to get seated and then informs them that he'll give them a tour of the school starting with the homeroom. During the tour, he informs them of the study groups, namely the Attack Magic Group, the Quality of Life Study Group, and the Body Enhancement Study Group. All these groups are like school clubs where extracurricular activities are done by students. Julius immediately declares that he would join the Body Enhancement Study Group if it wasn't for his royal duties to Prince August, but Aug explains that his royal status isn't important in the Magic Academy, so he's free to join whatever group he chooses. Alice asks Shin what group he would like to join, but he says that he doesn't have a preference. August overhears and teases him, saying it's because he could probably fit in any study group of his choice. He then suggests that Shin create his study group from scratch and the teacher supports the idea. They suggest the group would be about learning the otherworldly style of magic Shin practices. Immediately, Shin's classmates Lynn Huggs, Yuri Carlton, and Tony Freydall declare that they would like to be in his new study group. The teacher points out that they need 5 members, and a faculty advisor and are required to submit their request form before they can start. The teacher volunteers to be their faculty advisor and Caecilian also shows interest, so Lynn suggests that the group name be called the Ultimate Study Group. Shin doesn't like the name, but it kind of sticks since everyone else likes it. Later, during a closed-door meeting with King Decium, it's revealed that the appearance of demons in the land has been gradually increasing, and Gaster suggests that the occurrences might be artificially induced. As a result, King Decium orders that the Demon Hunters Society investigate and find out the cause of the increased demon sightings. Meanwhile, at the Rateberg mansion, Kurt's father scolds him for using his status as a noble to intimidate his people at the Magic Academy. However, Kurt isn't having any of it and begins throwing a tantrum, stating that he is a special person and should not be treated like a mere commoner. His father then knocks him out with a punch and decides to punish him for his misbehavior by locking him in his room. The next day, the class is informed that Kurt has been grounded and Shin finally asks why Kurt has such an attitude. The classmates explain that he wasn't like that in middle school, and one of them even suggests that he only changed when he started attending Mr. Strom's classes in the lab. The students explain that Strom was exiled from another kingdom and became a teacher. He had offered to teach students who weren't very good with magic and help them get better, but most of them declined because they felt it seemed shady, especially because Strom wears eye patches over both his eyes. Meanwhile, at the Rateberg estate, Strom arrives and speaks to Kurt's mother. She laments that she no longer understands her son and is very uncomfortable with the tension between him and his father. Strom, with a suspicious grin on his face, tells her that he'll have a word with him to help get him in line. He goes up to Kurt's room to find him restrained to the ground. Strom then begins reminding him that he is a special person and can get whatever he wants. His words only push him further over the edge, and he snaps and tells Strom that he can't get the girl he wanted because there is a hindrance. Hearing this, Strom infuses him with dark magic and tells him to make sure he deals with whatever obstacle is in his way. Afterward, Strom leaves the estate with a sinister look on his face. The next day, at lunchtime, August teases Shin using Kurt as an excuse to continually escort Sicilian even though he is no longer a threat. Both of them get flustered and immediately come up with excuses that make the entire class laugh. One of the students talks about how search magic could be used to detect threats from afar, so Shin explains the concept and accidentally reveals that he killed a 10-meter tall demon bear when he was only 10 years old. After lunch, while walking in the school, Shin senses a demon nearby, and the next thing he sees is a demonized Kurt hurling a mighty blaze of flames at them. Shin immediately puts up a shield to protect his friends. He tells them to activate their magically defensive uniforms and get to safety while he faces the demonoid. The intensity of the attacks burns him, but he soon starts regenerating thanks to his enchanted cloth. He immediately orders August to evacuate everyone since they'll only hold him back. Once they leave, Kurt charges at him with great speed and a sinister look on his face. He seems to have lost his mind as the dark magic has completely consumed him. However, when Shin blasts him with lightning, he realizes that Kurt hasn't totally lost his mind because he had been cursing at him while they fought. Shin decides that he can still save him and attempts to get through to him with words. However, Kurt becomes more enraged and he begins preparing to self-destruct by summoning a huge blast that would wipe out the entire school. Desperate to save the school and his friends, Shin pulls out his magically infused sword and jets toward him with his flying boots. When he gets close enough, he begrudgingly decapitates Kurt in a flash. A few moments later, his classmates who watched the whole fight come out and are all surprised that Shin could defeat a demonoid. However, Shin doesn't feel like a hero because he'd never killed someone before and wonders if he could have handled it a different way. After the incident, the news of Shin's feat spreads like wildfire and he's getting a bit overwhelmed by the attention he is getting in town. August approaches him to ask how he's holding up, so he reveals that he's been thinking about the fight with Kurt a lot. He remembers that during the battle, Kurt still had some of his senses, unlike the average demonoid that is completely mindless. As a result, Shin concludes that maybe Kurt was demonized by a sinister human experiment. Back at home, King Dacium arrives with his guards to present Shin with the award of the First Order of Merit for his feat. Merlin immediately reminds Dacium about his promises not to use Shin for political reasons, but the king explains that matters concerning demons are usually made public, and since Shin defeated a demonoid in such a short time before it became a threat, he deserves the recognition and the people deserve to know who saved them. Eventually, Merlin reluctantly allows the award to be presented to Shin, and Melida is surprised by how quickly Shin continues to find himself in trouble. So much for being prudent and keeping a low profile. The next day, the residents can't help but stare at Shin while he's walking to school with Maria and Sicilian. Some love-struck girls even begin imagining how the fight went down and talk about how he's probably engaged to one of the girls he walks with. At school, it's the same case because now everyone wants to join Shin's study group, so the class teacher, who is also his faculty advisor, tells them that the ability to use interdimensional storage portals is the minimum requirement to get in. Elsewhere, King Dacium holds another meeting with Dominic and Dennis, the chief of security, and asks them to carry out a thorough investigation into the artificially engineered demons. Back in school, Mr. Marcus admits 2 students into Shin's study group. Mark being a member of a renowned blacksmith family, and Olivia Stone, a very talented baker. Seeing that Mark comes from a family that owns the best forge in the land, Shin gives him his sword and asks him to help him make it more durable. Mark explains that he could make it better but that it would break much easier. Later, Security Bureau investigators Alt and Carlos visit Mr. Strawn in his home when they realize that Kurt was demonized shortly after Strawn went to see him. When they get to his place, they make small talk first by asking what happened to his eyes. They notice that he can see despite being blind, so Strom explains that he was born a noble in another empire but lost his eyes in his home during a power struggle. The investigators then tell him that they're carrying out some study on the demonoid's body and request that he assist them in the procedure so he can share his insights since he's a high-level magician. Back in school, Shin wonders what kind of sword Mark should make for him, and he says that he wants it to be a thin blade. However, he's not too thrilled by the fact that it would break more easily. His classmates suggest that it's not such a bad idea because he can easily get a new sword, but Shin tells them that he doesn't get much of an allowance. His classmates are shocked at this, but he explains that Granny told Merlin not to give him too much so that he would learn the value of money. Well, that's what you get for being a clueless SS ranked 15-year-old. Moving on, Shin asks Maria and Caecilian to escort him to Mark's workshop on the way home. They agree, but Maria tells them that she would also like to go to Olivia's bakery because she can't wait to taste her new pastries. Meanwhile, Alt and Carlos arrive at their headquarters with Strawn. They take him inside and they head to the place where Kurt's body supposedly is. However, on getting there, Strawn is ambushed by a lot of soldiers. The investigators then reveal that it was a trap that Strawn fell right into because the king made sure the demonoid's identity was kept a secret from the public, but somehow, Strawn already knew. Seeing that the jig is up, Strawn reveals that he knew and admits that he was responsible for it because he experimented on Kurt. With a sinister grin etched on his face, he shows how thrilled he is that Kurt didn't disappoint and danced extremely well to his tune. Upon hearing this, the guards prepare to attack the insanely powerful mage. Meanwhile, Shin and his classmates are walking home together while engaging in discussions when a wall near them is broken down by an explosion. When the dust settles, the students look inside to see Mr. Strawn surrounded by guards. Shin, who blames him for Kurt's death, immediately charges at him with his new sword. The two engage in a fierce battle until Strawn flies up and stays there, mocking the wise man's grandchild for his inability to use flight magic. This pisses Shin off, so he uses his flying boots to get to him and strikes him with his sword while combining the attack with magic. An enraged Strawn repels his attacks, and a huge explosion follows which breaks Shin's sword. When the dust clears, he sees that Strawn's eye patch has been destroyed and his red eyes are on full display, implying that he's also a demonoid. Shin is surprised to see a demonoid who has his sense of reasoning intact, but Strawn declares that there's nothing reasonable about him because now, human life means nothing to him and he's either going to kill them or exploit them. However, Shin isn't going to let any of that happen, so he attacks Strawn again, and this time he engulfs him with a chain reaction spell that results in a blast that seems to obliterate him. After the battle, Dominic Gaster, Michael's successor as commander of the Order of Knights, arrives with Dennis to see that Shin has already taken care of the threat. A man named Algren Rupert, the captain of the court magic division, also comes and commends Shin for his bravery and thanks him for saving everyone. Rupert then asks how he was able to defeat the demonoid, and Shin says that he converged the light from the sun and blasted it down as a massive heat ray. After he is done explaining how he used the sun's energy to defeat Strom, everyone is astonished and he wonders to himself if his heat ray was also the only reason the small craters he created turned into glass. Elsewhere, it is revealed that Strom is still very much alive. He thinks about how he narrowly escaped death and concludes that Shin is very dangerous and decides to be more careful so he doesn't foil his plans. Later, Melida and Maria gossip about how deeply in love Shin and Caecilian are with each other. Everyone except them is aware of the spark, but they don't know because they have no experience in the affairs of love. Sometime later, Shin explains to August how strange the fight with Strom was. He states that he performed the same spell alone and it didn't cause the kind of explosion in the facility. He then concludes that Strom must have amplified the explosion as a decoy to enable him to escape. It becomes clear that Strom might still be a threat, so August informs Shin that the king would willingly sponsor him to obtain any weapon he needs because he's the only one who can take on a demonoid. Soon, they both arrive at Mark's workshop and are surprised to see that Olivia is already there, but the other girls arrive to take her away for some questioning. Initially, the head smith does not want any distraction but is honored to see the caliber of people in his workshop and is willing to make Shin any type of sword he desires. Elsewhere, a man named Zest plans to use the chaos caused by the increased number of demons as an opportunity to take over the kingdom for himself. Back in town, Shin decides to get Caecilian a piece of jewelry but focuses on the fact that it must be able to withstand enchantment and doesn't care about looks. However, when he sees that Caecilian would prefer something pretty, he agrees to get her anything she wants. He eventually picks out a beautiful ring for her, knowing she would like it. Later, Shin gets dressed up and arrives at his award ceremony. He's both overwhelmed and honored as he is presented before the king and nobles to receive the award, declaring him the kingdom's hero. During the ceremony, King Dasim uses the opportunity to reiterate his promise not to use Shin for political purposes and urges the nobles to leave him out of their squabbles. He informs everyone at the ceremony of his promise and how breaking it would make the Weissman and his family leave their kingdom. The next day, Shin's house is surrounded by civilians who want to see the newly awarded hero, so instead of walking to school, he opens a portal from inside his house to get to school with Maria and Sicilian. On getting to school, the rest of his classmates are astonished by his strange transportation magic, so he attempts to explain that it's a bit different from the concept of teleportation. Although the concept of his portal is a bit difficult for them to understand, he assures them that they'll get it one day since they're in the same study group and he'll teach them. The thought gives him an idea, so Shin decides to set up a boot camp to help them level up their powers. First, he must check how much magic they possess, so he asks Maria to create a magical barrier. She makes one that's too thin, so he informs her that such a barrier stands no chance against a regular demon attack. Next, he asks Sicilian to make one, and she successfully creates a powerful barrier to everyone's surprise. Shin then explains that he enchanted the ring he gave her, which enhances the power and control of her magic. Afterward, Shin displays a small portion of the magic he possesses. Immediately they fall to the ground and are choked by the pressure of the density of his magic. He explains that they still have a lot to learn, but assures them that he'll teach them every day till they're at the level they're supposed to be. Elsewhere, Strom is pleased to find out that the kingdom is preparing for war and commends Zest for stirring up the chaos. He plans to sit patiently and watch while the kingdom and the empire unknowingly dance to his tune. Shin returns home with his friends and explains how useful the portals were because his newfound fame has made it impossible for him to simply walk to school. Maria and Sicilian are pleased that they would technically be second-generation students of the great Merlin, but the wise man explains to them that Shin learned most of what he knows on his own. To encourage them, he shows them that he can now use Shin's gate magic, which they thought would be an impossible task. This display inspires them to push themselves extra hard to also catch up to Shin. The dude forgot to tell them how long it took him to master the spell. The next day, Shin returns to Smith's workshop to see the prototype sword that has been made for him. August then speaks with Shin and suggests that the sword be mass-produced for the army since war is imminent. August explains that the Empire is attacking them for an unknown reason, and if things get very bad, the army would be forced to recruit students to fight as well. August makes it clear that the kingdom is truly grateful to Shin for his help so far and would not drag him into a war or involve him in other political issues against his will. Regardless, Shin states that they wouldn't need to drag him in because he's willing to help fight with the army if it comes to that. He states that if his friends are in trouble, he would gladly go to war to save them. Elsewhere, the leader of the Empire is furious when he realizes that Zest's intel was wrong. It turns out that the kingdom hasn't been ravaged by demon attacks because they're also preparing for war. The Emperor is even more enraged when he learns that Zest has fled the country, so he vows to have him hunted down and executed for manipulating him. Suddenly, he's informed that the Empire is under siege by demons, so he orders his army to immediately retreat in a bid to protect what's left of his country. Elsewhere, the kingdom's army attempts to chase the Empire's army back, but they're informed that the demons are preventing them from doing so. Back in the Empire, Strom has taken over the Empire with his extremely powerful army of Demonoid. The Emperor returns only to be brutally murdered by Strom, who accuses him of betrayal sometime in the past. The kingdom's army soon finds out about how Strom usurped the Emperor's throne with the help of his 12 powerful Demonoids, and so it becomes clear that he was the one behind the entire war. At school, the students are informed that Strom now has full control of the Empire, and that even though the kingdom's army is being prepared, the students might also have to fight in the war. Later, Decium orders the Magic Academy and Knight Military to hold joint training sessions to improve combat readiness for potential demon attacks. The students are not exactly thrilled by the news, and Maria explains that while the Magic Academy studies magic, students of the Knight Military are gym heads that work out all day. Because of this, the mages aren't too keen on working with them, especially because they are bullies. Shin suggests that they set their differences aside and try to work together, but his classmates are stuck up on the fact that the Knight Military students think they're superior. Once again, Shin tries to reason with them by reminding them that everyone has strengths and weaknesses, but that backfires. His classmates begin pointing out how it's not the case for him because he excels in both magic and sword fighting. They all wonder how he became so good in combat, and he drops another bombshell by revealing that he was trained by the legendary Michael. The classmates instantly begin talking about the Great Knight Commander, and Maria suggests that since Shin was trained by him, the Knight students wouldn't pick on them. However, August states that they'll probably try to intimidate Shin because of jealousy. Shin chimes in, stating that they should try to work together with the Knights, but they all disagree with him. On the day of the training session, students from each class are joined to form groups of 8 to fight against demons. Shin's group of 4 is paired with another group of 4 from the Military Knights Academy, who waste no time before putting their superiority complex on display. When Shin asks if they've ever fought a demon before, the Knight students get defensive, thinking that Shin is trying to insult them. They claim that he's just looking for a way to brag about the demonoid he killed, but Shin explains that he just wants everyone to set their differences aside, because if they don't, they'll certainly get killed. However, the Knights are very confident that they can handle it on their own and ask that Shin and the other magic students just stay out of their way. Witnessing their unending rude comments, Prince August finally speaks up and asks them to learn how to work together, but the Knights stand their ground. Aug decides to honor their wish and asks Shin to let them work alone and see how things play out. He then instructs the mages to only assist if things get too serious for the Knights to handle alone. August wants to show them the importance of having a mage on their team. Later, they arrive at the location and the students discover that they've been assigned a very dangerous mission, and that's because they are S-class students. Suddenly, they're greeted by 2 people who Shin knows as his big brother and sister, Siegfried and Christina. The other students are surprised at how casual Shin is with the knight and the magician in charge of protecting the king. Seg and Christina are cool with the idea of letting the Knights fight alone because they believe it's a good way to teach them the importance of cooperation. While walking through the forest, the Knights are on guard even when there is no demon in their proximity. When Shin senses a demon approaching them, he informs everyone to prepare for battle. The demonized boar charges at them, but the Knights are eager to show what they can do. However, they can't even match its speed and are all quickly defeated and humiliated by the giant boar. While it charges to finish them off, Shin steps in to save them and kills the boar in an instant. Afterward, Christina explains to the Knights that they're very weak but motivates them to train harder. Sizillian then tends to the student Knight's wounds using her healing magic, and so they express their gratitude. Shin gets jealous when he sees how the Knight boys are talking to his baby, so August suggests he just proclaim his love for Sizillian to stop the others from talking to her. While they discuss, he senses a horde of demons coming at them from afar. Shin detects that one of the many demons is very powerful and tells the others to brace themselves. Just then, another group emerges from the northern forest and quickly begs them to flee because over 100 demons are marching in that direction. Shin then surprises everyone when he suddenly asks Sieg for permission to take on the demons alone. Sieg, who is aware of Shin's capabilities, confidently agrees and everyone steps back as Shin performs a spell. Everyone is shocked to see one of the most powerful demons, a tiger demon, charging at them alongside many other demon beasts. While he calmly summons a powerful blast, he soon realizes that he may be going overboard. However, he's a little upset, so he doesn't mind blowing off some steam by unleashing the attack. He infuses his regular fire magic with pure hydrogen and unleashes an attack of insane magnitudes on the demons. His magic covers a huge portion of the forest, and when the dust settles, everyone is stunned to see the massive destruction that resulted from the blast. After witnessing Shin's incredible power flex firsthand, the students from the Magic Academy continue their joint training with the student knights, who are now willing to cooperate. With time, they gradually demonstrate their ability to work together as a team and can now defeat demons. Sometime later, Sieg tells Shin that he's impressed with the mage's improvement. He asks Shin what kind of training regimen he utilizes, and this prompts him to explain how he's been teaching the mages in his study group how to visualize magic the same way he does. Surprisingly, Sieg expresses his interest in learning what Shin is teaching them in the group, but August points out that it could cause diplomatic issues if Shin teaches someone in the military. August adds that if Shin's magic got into the wrong hands, the world would be destroyed by the magic users instead of the demons who they can barely contain. Despite the explanation, Sieg still wants to learn the basics at least. Aug tells him to constantly train to increase the amount of magic he can control day by day. Although Sieg doesn't believe it can be that simple, Aug proves it to him by asking Maria and Sizillian to demonstrate their shield barriers to him. The girls state that theirs are still a lot weaker than Shin's, but are confident that with time, they would get better. Sieg is immediately motivated and decides to keep practicing just like them. Soon, the joint training session comes to an end, and one of the student knights approaches Shin to thank him for assisting her in defeating a demon bear. She reveals that she finally realizes the importance of knights working together with magicians. Shin wonders how the other groups are faring, but it is revealed that things aren't going smoothly because, in another group, there's a knight who keeps insulting the magicians for being weaklings. He then fights the demons alone, but he and his fellow student knights find themselves in danger. Thankfully, magicians from Shin's study group arrive just in time to save them, using the magic that Shin taught them. They soon discover that the Adamant Knight hates being upstaged by a magician named Tony who he used to be friends with in the Knight Academy. Tony wonders why the guy loathes him, but when he tells the group that a girl chose him over the said knight, they finally understand the origin of the intense animosity being hurled at them the entire time. In another part of the forest, another group of knights is stationed with some members of Shin's study group. Here, they also try to work together with the student knights who won't even entertain the thought. Just like before, the student knights tell the magicians to stay back so they can fight the demons alone, but once again, they're overpowered and Shin's friends have to save them by unleashing powerful magic. The entire training session comes to an end in the evening, and the last group explains that they may have gone a bit overboard with their power. The others also explain that their training session went the same way and they all thanked Shin for helping them. However, Shin wears a long face and wonders if he should be thanked. His friends ask what's wrong, and August explains that everyone in the ultimate study group except for Shin will be placed under national supervision after graduation as a result of their newly enhanced magical abilities. August adds that they would be placed in a special unit after graduation and the units would be under his control. Shin apologizes for somehow altering their paths in life, but they continue thanking him and express how proud they are of their new powers. Plus, they get instant employment from the kingdom, so that's a double win. They buy labor markets. Instead of feeling bad or overwhelmed, the students are even more eager to learn more from Shin, but Og advises him not to make them too powerful. Some days later, Shin's group continues training hard, and August reminds them to never reveal how powerful they've become to outsiders. Although it is too secret information, he decides it's okay to inform them about the activities of the demonoids and how they are ravaging the smaller towns and villages of the Empire. It's even worse because the demonoids are multiplying rapidly and the numbers in their ranks keep increasing with each subsequent attack. It becomes clear that Strom is doing the same thing he did to Kurt and is transforming more people into demonoids by infusing them with dark magic. Shin can't help but wonder what kind of deadly plan Strom has come up with, because even a single demonoid is already powerful enough to destroy an entire nation. The fact that they've been told a national secret makes everyone in the ultimate group realize how special they truly are. Hence, they decide to get even more serious and train harder than ever before because of how high the stakes are at the moment. Shin then decides that augmenting their school's magic lessons with a training camp would help improve everyone's skills. Everyone suggests a suitable location for the training camp, but they have a hard time choosing. Sizillion informs them that her family owns a hot springs resort and they all agree that it'll be the best location for the camp. Later that night, Shin informs Merlin and Melida about the training camp and they agree to his idea but explain that they would be supervising them. Melida points out how Shin always gets into trouble whenever she takes her eyes off him, so to her, chaperoning their camping experience isn't such a bad idea. The next day, the group heads to the hot springs resort in carts dragged by horses that have enchanted gear to enable them to travel the long journey. During the trip, the other students explain to Shin that enchanted gears were once used only in battle, but Melida was the first mage to focus on developing useful everyday enchanted items. Along the way, the group detects demons nearby, and to show just how confident they've all become, they draw straws to decide who gets to fight them. Lin wins the round and uses her newly enhanced magical abilities to effortlessly defeat the demons and stun the merchants at the same time. Shin also takes the opportunity to give her some helpful tips on how to get even better. Meanwhile, Merlin and Melida watch the entire thing from inside the cart and are astonished by how much all the students in the group have improved thanks to Shin. Later that night, they finally arrive at the hot spring resort where the workers at the mansion welcome them and ask that Shin take good care of their lady, which makes the two students blush. Inside, Merlin thanks all the students for hanging out with Shin because he's never had friends his age before. August points out that no one ever treated him as an equal because of his royal status, but Shin does, and so he sees him as a true friend. The others say the same and thank Shin for improving their lives, and so Shin takes the opportunity to thank Merlin for teaching him and making him the person he is. Upon hearing this, the old man gets emotional and finds it difficult to hold back the waterworks. Sometime later, the camping experience is going well and Merlin gives everyone tips to help them improve during his training session. Melida also helps to tutor the students, and Shin admits that having his guardians present has made the camp better than he could have hoped. During Shin's training sessions, the adults are once again impressed that the students can now easily cast spells without incantations. However, Shin still doubts that they're ready to fight demonoids and suggests that everyone, including himself, needs more training before they're able to take on the full force of Strahn's demonoid army. Later, Shin tells the students he wants to try a new spell, and even though he tells them they don't need shields, they all conjure shield barriers to brace themselves for whatever absurdity he plans to try out. He begins casting a spell that seems new to all the students, and so they all mentally prepare themselves to be amazed. However, Shin explains that it's not a new spell and he's just condensing all the energy from an explosion spell into one direction. The result is another extremely powerful beam that creates a massive path through the entire landscape. Shin celebrates his achievement, but Melida is furious at his recklessness because he admits that he didn't even expect that level of destruction. August then asks Shin to help him get back to the kingdom so he can get updated on the current situation at the Empire. Shin creates one of his useful gates, and just like going through a door, he and Aug are back in the kingdom. On their arrival, Shin is introduced to a girl named Elizabeth and is shocked to find out that she and August are engaged. However, Elizabeth is mad at August because he left his little sister May and didn't invite them to meet Melida, who they adore. May then introduces herself to Shin and explains that she's a huge fan of Melida, who is hailed as the guru. The two girls plead with Aug to allow them to follow him back to camp, but he refuses, explaining that the camp is a place for serious training and isn't for fun. However, King Decium orders August to take the girls with him so they can learn a thing or two from Melida and Merlin. He also points out how using Shin's gate will ensure their safety because they can be transported back home in an instant if there's an emergency. Not long after, Aug reminds his fiancée and little sister to be on their best behavior as they would be in the presence of national heroes, but Elizabeth states that she only came to ensure that other girls stay away from her man. Elizabeth throws a fit when she remembers that August always talks about Shin and expresses her jealousy, but August explains that Shin has a girl already. Aug then takes the opportunity to press Shin into making things official with Caecilian so he can get some closure, but Shin tells him that he's not sure how Caecilian would feel about it. Hearing this, Aug advises him to be more courageous so he can ask her out and make their relationship exclusive. Later, the new girls on camp go to see Melida, and May is particularly excited when she holds her hand. Melida then tells a funny story of how Shin used to hold her hand, and the other students don't waste the opportunity to tease him. However, Caecilian doesn't laugh at him, claiming that their kids will be adorable and that she'll gladly hold their hands. It's only after she utters those words that she realizes the meaning, and suddenly a wave of embarrassment washes over her. As she scurries away, Shin finally realizes that she's interested in him, and Aug is surprised it took him so long to see it. Well, August, it takes a great mind to be clueless about love. A while later, Shin goes alone to see Caecilian outside. They both recall how they first met and exchange compliments before Shin summons the courage to finally tell her he loves her. Caecilian then reveals that she loves him too, but always thought he was just being nice to her. The two are about to have a moment, but it is quickly interrupted when it becomes obvious that everyone had been eavesdropping on them. It's at that moment that Shin confidently declares that he and Caecilian are now officially dating. However, Aug puts a damper on the moment by reminding Shin that they're still in the middle of a training camp and preparing for a huge war. He tells Shin that he doesn't want him to get distracted by his new relationship, but Shin points out that August was the one who encouraged him to go ahead and make things serious with Caecilian. The next day, Shin insists on some special training at the beach. He explains that they would participate in a game of volleyball. The rules are simple. Magic can only be used on the ball, and when the game begins, it's obvious that these guys are preparing for war because the game is very intense, and is giving Azula and Ember Island vibe. As Merlin watches them, he randomly gives them tips on how to train properly while also playing the game. Later that night, the group talks about how August met his fiancée, Elizabeth, while Maria laments that she still hasn't found the love of her life.
We do not care.
However, their bedtime stories are cut short when Melida arrives. They all hide and pretend to be sleeping, but she eventually finds him and gives him the usual scolding. The next morning, Shin tells Caecilian that they should go get breakfast together, but she requests a favor first. Caecilian takes him to her parents' house to see her father Cecil and her mother Eileen. They arrive at the house quite early before her father goes to work, and Shin understands that she wants to inform her parents of their relationship. Inside the house, her parents are surprised that they left the training camp to see them and conclude that their message must be really important. Shin then asks for their approval of his relationship with Caecilian. However, he is startled when her father leaps for joy and embraces him. Caecilian's mother tells the men to calm down, reminding them that since she comes from a noble family, she is required to be engaged to the person she's dating. The look on Shin's face makes it clear that he's willing to go the extra mile to make sure he's with Caecilian, and he agrees to terms without hesitation. Back at the training camp, Elizabeth is astonished by the high-level magic being demonstrated by the students. Merlin asks if the new girls would like to try the magic spells, but Elizabeth reveals that she has no aptitude for magic. May, on the other hand, gives it a go and amazes Merlin with her magical abilities because she is still very young. Seeing her ability and potential, the other students are inspired to train even harder so that they won't be upstaged by her in the future. After a while, May goes a bit overboard with her powers and creates a small blast. The other students refuse to be upstaged by the young princess, and when she sees this, she hides behind Shin, which makes August a bit upset that she did not hide behind him, even though he's her older brother. Meanwhile, at the Empire, Strom receives news that his army is making tremendous progress in his plans. The Demonoids are now attacking caravans, which is causing cities all over the Empire to suffer food shortages. As a result of this news, Strom decides that it's time to move on to the next stage of his plan. Back at the training camp, the group once again hides in fear behind their magic shield barriers as Shin decides to try out a new magic spell. This time, they double the barriers and brace themselves for impact, but Shin explains that the spell isn't even an attack spell. Everyone is then amazed when Shin uses his magic to make a rock float. They're even more astonished when he uses the same magic spell to make himself levitate. By applying some of his wind magic, Shin can hover around, and after a while, he begins flying. Everyone watches in awe and hopes that one day they can learn how to do it just like him. Later that night, Shin finally tells Merlin and Melida that he and Caecilian are now engaged. The old-timers assumed it would happen eventually, and now Melida wishes to have a meeting with Caecilian's parents. Soon, the two families meet and Merlin explains to Cecil and Eileen that Shin isn't his biological grandson. He and Melida assumed that the reason Caecilian's parents agreed to the engagement was that they thought Shin was related to the Weissman by blood. Due to this assumption, Merlin deemed it fit that he clarify the details with Caecilian's parents so they don't go on making a mistake based on their assumption. After the revelation, Caecilian's father expresses great disappointment, which is understandable to a certain degree. However, he suddenly reveals that Shin's blood relation to Merlin wasn't a factor when giving their blessings. Cecil explains that their decision was rather based on how Shin values their daughter, Caecilian above everything else. After Caecilian's parents explain this to them, Shin vows to protect their daughter with all his power, and they express their gratitude to him. Sometime later, Shin gives all the students in the group upgraded uniforms with higher defense enchantment and even the ability to control temperature. However, he hasn't given them rocket boots like his and explains that it's because it is very difficult to control. They would require some more advanced training to master using rocket boots, but for now, he assures them that the upgraded uniforms would suffice. The students agree with him and presume that now that they have upgraded uniforms, Shin would probably up the difficulty of their training sessions, making them extremely grueling henceforth. Unfortunately, Shin confirms their presumption by informing them that they would be doing combat training against a colossal monster on a catastrophic level. Although all the students are instantly gripped by fear, Shin assures them that with their current training and newly upgraded uniforms, they're ready for the challenge ahead. May is disappointed to see that she'll once again be left out, but August tries to calm her down by explaining that it will be too dangerous for her and they don't want her to get hurt. To appease her and make her feel more involved in their training, Shin gives her a magical communication device so she can talk to them during their hunt. However, this action infuriates Melida because Shin has once again done something reckless by creating another society-altering device. Yeah dude, just casually event telephone to appease a spoilt noble.
Come on, man.
The training begins as Shin and his group advance into the forest, and not long after, Caecilian detects the catastrophic beast, which they soon discover to be a demonized lion. Shin explains that demonoid lions are the strongest and even more powerful than demonized tiger. However, they are much slower than the tiger, so they should use that to their advantage. As a result of this, Caecilian suggests that using long-range attacks to fight the demon would be the smartest option. Shin then splits the team up into a team and a support team and encourages them to do their best. Seeing the support Shin gives them, they're determined to defeat the lion demon. In the end, they don't disappoint him and combine their magical abilities and training to completely obliterate the lion demon. Afterward, Shin expresses his delight at their success and points out how the support-focused team members were able to take down the lion demon together while the attack group would probably achieve such a feat individually. The training session continues and they don't let Shin down as they slay several demon beasts individually one after the other. After proving that they can kill demons on their own, August reminds Shin to also take part in the session. Later that night, Shin and Caecilian attend the party where their engagement will be announced. King Decium is also in attendance and offers up a toast to celebrate the new couple. After the party, Shin speaks with Caecilian outside and admits that he's doing things backward. Although the action usually comes up before an engagement, Shin decides to follow through with his plans and officially presents Caecilian with an engagement ring. He places the ring on her finger and the two finally have their long-awaited private moment as they share a kiss. A few days later, Shin decides to teach the students in his study group how to fly just like him. Shin does so by casting his floating spell on them and also explains the concept to them. The training is coming to an end and August points out that their newly upgraded uniforms would prove very useful when they attend an upcoming ceremony that they've been invited to at the kingdom. Elsewhere, Strom sits in the Empire Castle and explains that now that every town and village has been destroyed by his demonoids, it's time to think of the next step in his plans. Strom explains that his plan to starve the commoners living in the Empire until they grow to resent the nobles has gone perfectly. This hatred allowed him to easily demonize them so they would slaughter all the nobles until the Empire was destroyed. Strom then thanks his demonoids for their efforts but reveals that he's not sure what to do next because his major goal was overthrowing the Empire. This news gets some of the demonoids upset because they desire to continue their rampage and don't mind ravaging neighboring kingdoms. However, Strom isn't interested in carrying out such tedious missions. As a result, several demonoids choose to go against him and set out on their own. Surprisingly, Strom doesn't force his will on them and instead encourages them as they leave, reiterating that his only objective was to take over the Empire, and explains that since he's achieved that, the demonoids are free to leave if they wish. After hearing this statement so many times, Strom's assistant finally decides to ask why he hated the Empire so much that he decided to destroy it. She also points out that he was born here and was even supposed to be emperor. Strom then explains that he wasn't always a demonoid and decides to tell her a story of what he was like in his early life. Many years ago, Strom worked closely with the commoners on their farms, even though he was the favorite to ascend the throne. People noticed how free he was with the commoners and asked him why he treated them with so much respect. He explained that even though he grew up in a world where nobility got him preferential treatment, but after traveling to different lands as a child, his views on the matter changed drastically. He realized that other countries didn't have anything like slaves and even the commoners in those lands lived at a higher standard than their counterparts in the Empire. As a result, Strom decided that it was the kind of life he desired for the commoners in the Empire, a better life. He was determined to use his knowledge to better the future of the Empire and its people. While working late one night, Strom was approached by his heavily pregnant wife, Arya, who expressed her worries that he was working too hard and putting his health at risk. To alleviate her worries, Strom assured her that he was fine and explained that the people of the Empire need him so he has to work overtime. Elsewhere, a man named Harold, who would eventually become the emperor, holds a meeting with other dukes of the Empire. They all express their frustration that all of a sudden, the residents are relocating to Strom's territory of the Empire instead of theirs. What bothers them even more is that Strom is inching closer to becoming emperor by the day. The dukes are sure that if Strom becomes emperor, he would implement policies that would benefit the commoners at their loss, and so they are desperate to make sure that doesn't happen. Amid their frustrated grumbles, Harold chimes in and assures them that he has come up with a plan to stop Strom, but that they would need to keep him busy in the capital. A while later, Strom is excited when he receives an invitation letter to a convention. He shares the delightful news with his wife, Arya, because it appears that the other nobles finally want to support his ideas to favor the commoners. However, Arya has a bad feeling about it and thinks that it might be a setup. Once again, Strom assures her that he'll be fine, reminding her that he's one of the most powerful mages in the Empire. Elsewhere, a member of the military police force informs some commoners that there have been recent incidents of kidnapping and that the people abducted are being sold off as slaves. Soon, gossip about the kidnappings begins spreading like wildfire, and surprisingly, the rumors making the rounds put Strom as the person behind the heinous act. Unfortunately, many gullible people believe the rumors, and some of them even suggest that it makes sense because it explains why Strom is unusually kind to the commoners. At a hideout, the police officer from earlier laughs with his colleague about how fast the rumors are spreading and that no one has found out the truth. Turns out that these guys aren't even officers but are men hired to make sure Strom doesn't leave the capital. The next day, the fake officers head out again and inform the commoners that they still haven't found the kidnappers. They then explain that they'll need civilian assistance in catching the culprits responsible. Later, the fake officer stops a carriage that allegedly belongs to Strom when in reality, he was the one who set the whole thing up. He then opens the back of the wagon and reveals ladies tied up and explains that they are the people who Strom kidnapped and is transporting as slaves. The news quickly spreads, and the commoners who didn't believe the rumors at first now feel that Strom is the one responsible. The commoners are enraged by this discovery and decide to take matters into their hands. They decide that they won't wait for the military and decide to burn the source of the problem at its root. With fiery torches, the people march to Strom's mansion where his pregnant wife Arya is. They set his house ablaze in his absence, and everything burns to the ground with Arya trapped inside. At the same time, Strom returns to his territory in his carriage, excited that he'll soon be back home to his beloved wife. Looking out the window, Strom notices a burning building in the area where his house is supposed to be. Even though he rushes to the scene, it's already too late because the house has been burnt down and all he can do is watch. Kneeling before his wife's corpse, the heartbroken man asks why the people would do this to him, and they explain that they discovered that he was the one behind the kidnapping and slavery. However, after they tell him how they got to know him and the events that led to them burning his home, Strom realizes that he's been tricked because real military officers would never seek civilian assistance. He immediately concludes that the entire thing was a plot put together by Harold. After he explains to the commoners that they too have been tricked, they begin begging for forgiveness, but it's too late. Strom then denounces the foolish commoners who he had stood by for years and loses control of his powers, vowing to have his revenge on every human in the Empire. From the Emperor to the nobles and even the commoners who he sacrificed so much for, Strom vows that no one would be spared from his wrath. After ending his story, Demonoids in Strom's army finally understand why he destroyed the Empire, and they even believe he had to. However, now that the most important mission in his life has been completed, the Demonoids believe that he needs a new life goal. Zest then informs Strom's assistant, Myria, to join the Demonoids who left the army and lead them in a war against the kingdom of Earlshire to draw out a worthy opponent for Strom. That person is Shin Wolford because he's the only person who has defeated Strom in the past. Back in the kingdom, a ceremony is held for August to announce him as the heir. As the ceremony kickstarts, they are interrupted by the news of an attack by Demonoids on a nearby country. August calms everyone down by revealing that they have a group ready to take on the imminent threat. He informs them that Shin is the leader of the group and asks Shin to give a speech to reassure the people. With no other choice, Shin takes the stage and vows to take down the Demonoids as he renames the group the Ultimate Magicians. Talk about a cringe name, might as well call yourselves the Power Rangers of Ice Sky. Shin closes his speech by signaling his group to take to the sky and fly off. At the border of the kingdom, the Earlshire soldiers signal that the Demonoids are approaching, and it is decided that the civilians are to be evacuated. The guards are quite surprised by the large number of Demonoids advancing toward them, and so they use magic barriers to block the attacks. They decide to call for backup but are heartbroken when they're told that it would take several days for it to arrive. Thankfully, Shin and his group are jetting to the scene and are no longer far away. While flying, Shin's group makes fun of the new name, but he defends himself by explaining that he was under tremendous pressure. Soon enough, they arrive at the Swede kingdom that is under attack, and Maria expresses her excitement to finally face the Demonoids, but Shin assures her that they'll be able to defeat the enemies. Still, in the air, Shin instructs Sicilian to focus on healing the wounded people and tells the others to pair up to fight Demonoids. Just as the enemies begin tormenting the helpless civilians, Shin and his group land and begin saving them. One of the Demonoids taunts Shin for thinking that a mere human can defeat them, but Shin shuts him up with a magic blast that wipes him out. Suddenly, August begins giving a speech to the people, assuring them that a team strong enough has arrived to save them. He also takes the opportunity to warn the Demonoids to surrender immediately because they have a hero named Shin who kills Demonoids for fun on their side. The Ultimate Magicians finally begin their battle with the Demonoids and get mocked by one of them who teases them because of their young age. This pisses off Alice, who always goes overboard, so she is made to calm down because she has to focus and avoid getting too reckless and destructive with her fiery attacks in such a state. When Alice turns around to see who's responsible, Lynn explains that she used the water attack to kill the demonoids as well, and Alice then acknowledges that it was quite a brutal move. However, Lynn explains that since the demonoids are no longer human, they shouldn't have any pity on them, especially because of all the devastation they've caused throughout the Empire. Not long after, they encounter another demonoid, but this one is more powerful and mocks Alice for her size once again. However, this time, Lynn doesn't hold Alice back and the young mage unleashes the full force of her flaming attacks on the demonoid and vanquishes him instantly. After that display, Lynn and Alice continue their demonoid hunting and compete in a contest to see who can kill the most demonoids. Elsewhere, other group members fight the demonoids and also try to obtain information from them while they're at it. Just when it seems like all their efforts prove futile, they continue slaughtering the enemies until one of the demonoids finally agrees to talk. He explains that they attack because they have been demonized and are filled with hate as a result of being constantly exploited and treated like trash by the nobles of the Empire. The demonoid further explains that their hatred has grown so much that they now resent those who still live in peace, but the members of the group insist that they have no right to kill or harm innocent people. The other ultimate magicians continue to display their immense power as they continuously destroy many demonoids. They also manage to rescue several civilians while Sicilian uses her healing magic to attend to the injured civilians at the shelter. At the other end, Shin continues to obliterate any demonoid that attempts to challenge him. One of the enemies tries to find out Shin's weakness but gets discouraged when he realizes that he might not have any. The leader of Demonoid recognizes August as the prince and assumes that he's the leader of the ultimate magicians. He concludes that if he can defeat August, then the rest of the mages would be a walk in the park for him. However, August informs him that he's not the leader of the group, but the demonoid is undeterred and still wants to defeat him anyway. While the demonoid continues gloating, Maria attempts a sneak attack, but he blocks it effortlessly and counters with a powerful punch that would have broken every bone in her body if it wasn't for Shin's upgraded magical uniform. When he realizes that she's wearing magical gear, the demonoid plans to attack her on parts of her body that are unprotected, but she gets ahead of him and lands a powerful attack of her own before he can execute his wicked idea. However, the mages are in for a surprise because after the dust clears, they discover that the demonoid also possesses magical protective gear. He emerges from the wreckage unscathed and explains that he got a hold of the magical mace by killing the person who wielded it before him. The magicians are taken aback when they observe the mace and are astonished to see that it's the same one that Shin gave to the military. This discovery leaves them perplexed, but they shrug off any fear and prepare to resume the intense battle. However, the demonoid is very confident that he can defeat them with the magical gear and encourages them to attack him with all their might. The two mages decide to put all their training to the test and unleash their most devastating attacks on the demonoid. At first, he thought he could handle it, but his cockiness soon backfires and he's defeated by their perfectly timed combination attack. His magical gear gets destroyed by the overwhelming blasts and Maria insults him for losing focus. This serves as another distraction that gives August enough time to finish off the demonoid with an insane blast from behind that leaves him in a state of Rengoku. Back at the kingdom, the king notices that the fighting is gradually reducing, and so he's delighted to see that the young team of ultimate magicians are handling the situation well on their own. Merlin and Melida also look on and are relieved to know that they won't be needed on the battlefield. Hereby, one of Zest's accomplices is shocked to discover that Shin isn't the only extremely powerful member of the group. Meanwhile, Zest watches from a position outside the city and concludes that Shin is too powerful for the demonoids and feels that if things continue in this manner, they would fail their mission. Zest's initial mission was to measure Shin's power by making him fight the demonoids, but it appears that there hasn't even been anyone powerful enough to bother him. Seeing that he couldn't gather information with the first plans, Zest is desperate not to fail, so he calls on Miria, Strom's assistant, to join in the fight and hopes that she'll be powerful enough to give Shin a tough time. Sure enough, Miria displays her power and does some serious damage on the battlefield, which catches Strom's attention and makes him wonder why Zest is having so much fun without him. Elsewhere, Sicilian does her best to heal the injured but finds it difficult to keep up because her magic power is close to being exhausted. Back on the battlefield, Shin senses a powerful demonoid and discovers that it's Miria who recently joined in the fight. Two of the heroes attempt a sneak attack from above, but after several powerful blows, Miria emerges from the explosion unscathed. Although Alice goes overboard with her fire magic again, it doesn't do any damage to Miria, and after an impressive counterattack, the demonoid captures her. At this point, Alice warns the other heroes to retreat because she's realized that Miria is on a way higher level than the other demonoids they fought earlier. Elsewhere, some demonoids are informed that a powerful force is present but are confused when the others start retreating. Their confusion is cleared up, however, when they see that Shin is the powerful being that is ravaging them with devastating magical blasts. They all attempt to run away, but Shin unleashes his newest attack spell to annihilate them, ensuring that none of them get away from him. In another part of the huge battlefield, Shin's group arrives to save Alice from Miria, but soon realizes that they're no match for the demonoid. Miria demonstrates insane power to take on all the members that try to save her and single-handedly defeats them and even knocks Lin out cold. This pushes Alice to lose control of her power again, but before she can power up, Miria releases a blast at Tony, so she sacrifices herself and takes the hit. Just when Miria is about to finish the defeated members of the group, Shin arrives at the scene with a cold look on his face. He is enraged to see what Miria has done to his friends and prepares to fight the demonoid. Lin regains consciousness and warns Shin that Miria is a lot more powerful than the other demonoids. Undeterred, Shin instructs Miria to heal the injured team members. Still extremely furious, Shin stands up to face Miria, who explains that this fight is what she wanted because she'd be able to determine just how strong he is. The two then engage in an intense battle, and both parties show tremendous combat abilities as they combine magic attacks with physical ones. After a while, Miria decides to flee since the other demonoids have escaped. Miria prepares to leave, but after seeing the sinister grin on her face, Shin presumes that she's about to unleash a devastating attack. He warns everyone to run away, but there's no time for that, so he then instructed August to protect the others from the enormous explosion that Miria creates. Shin conjures a powerful barrier to protect everyone in the scope of the massive explosion. When the impact subsides, he then realizes that Miria was buying time for the demonoids to escape. Seeing that they escaped, Shin apologizes to his group for letting the demonoids slip away, as he wonders what the point of the attack was if they were only going to vanish mysteriously. However, his friends are more concerned by how powerful Miria was and wonder how bad things would have been if Strom was in the picture. Outside the kingdom, Miria leads the demonoids and explains that she was instructed by Zest to give them a chance to escape from Shin and his group of magicians. Strom watches from above as he sees Miria helping the demonoids retreat to safety. He looks down from the sky and appears a bit disappointed because ever since he took over the Empire, he's been quite bored. To solve his lack of entertainment, he decides that Shin would probably help fix his boredom and give him something to look forward to. Inside the kingdom, Shin goes to see Caecilian, who has been tending to the wounded civilians. He orders the rest of the team to help treat the wounded as well and enters the building. Deeper inside the building, Caecilian struggles to save a dying man's life with her healing magic, but eventually fails because of how severe his wounds were. Now she must look into the eyes of the sad woman next to her and inform her that her husband is dead. However, Caecilian doesn't know how to explain to the wife that her magic can't heal all wounds, so she decides to try and bring the man back by using some of her magic gear. She's still attempting to undress when Shin appears behind her and consoles her, explaining that it's not going to work. Shin then offers to help, and as he places his hands on the man, he thinks about how amazing Caecilian's power is because the man is somehow still alive. He focuses all his concentration on the intricate art of healing, and August watches in silence from afar in awe of how much power Shin possesses. Eventually, he heals him, and the man that was once presumed to be dead wakes up. Afterward, Caecilian expresses that she's upset and tells Shin that it's because she feels her power can never compare to his. She explains that she feels helpless because she always ends up relying on him to help or save her. However, Shin consoles her and points out that he was only able to save the man because of her. He further explains that the only reason the man held on that long was because of her magic. To further boost her confidence, Shin tells everyone around that she saved the man on her own. After saving the Swid Kingdom, the ultimate magicians receive praise from the people and the king, but August points out that he initially believed the attack was a decoy but is now perplexed because there hasn't been any strange incident recorded elsewhere. The prince also adds that Shin is a major threat to Strom and is certain that the Demonoid Emperor must have known Shin would fight in the war. He wonders why Strom didn't place any measures to take care of their young hero, and so he's uncertain certain of Strom's true intentions. To protect themselves from a future attack, August asks the king to ally with the Earlshire Kingdom, and this shocks everyone. However, the king understands August's viewpoint and the imminent danger, so he promises to consider the alliance. Afterward, Shin regrets that he didn't use his magic portals to get to the Swede nation sooner, but the others remind him that he can only use the magic gates to places he's been at least once. This makes Shin and August realize something at the same time. They both decide that by traveling to many nations of the world, he'd be able to create a gate to any of the kingdoms he's visited. Later that night, the group returns home through the magic gate and is welcomed by everyone who praise them for the success of their mission. August explains the alliance to his father and asks if he can serve as a diplomat to help form alliances with other kingdoms. His father is proud and agrees to his request. Later, Shin explains his plan with August to Merlin and Melida, and they both agree that he should go on his mission to save the kingdoms of the world. Aug's fiancée, Elizabeth, and his sister May are allowed to join the team, and sometime later, the ultimate magicians are ready to depart. Back at the Empire, Strock reminds his army leaders that he warned them about going up against Shin, but admits that their battle was quite entertaining. Zest wonders if Shin should be thanked for giving his master a new purpose. When Strom asks Miria about some secret business, she replies that she'll give him feedback later, touching her belly. The ultimate magicians bid farewell to the people of the kingdom and set out on their new mission. Later that night, Merlin and Melida talk about how quiet the place is with the kids absent, but the peace is short-lived when a portal appears, and the group walks into the room complaining about how someone forgot to secure accommodation for them. Melida is furious as usual, but Shin just pretends not to notice and asks if they can spend the night in the house.